Warning: the following contains explicit language and subject matter that may not be suitable for younger listeners, church folk, and people who enjoy kale smoothies.
Oh, Godfather, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do.
You can act like a man! What's the matter with you? Is this how you turned out a Hollywood Pinocchio that cries like a woman? What can I do? What can I do? What is that nonsense? It's ridiculous. You spend time with your family?
Sure I do.
Good. Because a man who doesn't spend time with his family can never be a real man.
Shot down here. I think he's gonna flip the house. I bet the house they kind of trashed it inside, so it's a nice house. I mean, location wise and all that. Anyway, let's move forward.
All right, we'll keep going. So, welcome back to APodAmongstMen. I'm your host, Steve B. We're doing another satellite episode from the Sunshine State of Florida. And I'm here with a very special guest. I've been trying to get this guy on for a little while now, and we finally made it happen. But my dad is here, Ralphie B.
How you doing, guys?
Yeah. So, welcome. I'm glad you agreed to do this.
I'm glad to do it. I, thought it might be a little bit different. So, let's give it a whirl and see what happens.
It's a new wave here. It's a new technology.
Yeah, I'm old school.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. We're going to get into exactly that, actually. So I want to start off with, basic stuff, like where you grew up around, like what time period.
Well, that's easy enough. I grew up in Newark. Some people say it's different.
Newark, New Jersey.
Newark, New Jersey. I was born in '49, so I lived through the big decade for me was the '60s. I mean, that's where I became of age.
Your formative years?
Oh, yeah. Well, a little bit was earlier than that, but the 60s was like, in my mind, if there's a heaven, when you die, that's what you're going to be. You're going to be back in the 60s with those big cars and all the things that we did in the 60s and becoming of age again, learning things that we thought would never change, but that have followed us through our life. A lot of those lessons. A lot of those, experiences. So, yeah, the 60s was probably, I could look back and see myself. I mean, big thing was how you dressed. You hung on the corner.
Oh, yeah.
You did with, you had wise guys as role models. So you had, developed a different way of looking at things and different way of handling things. Because you always did, like, how would so-and-so do this? If somebody, insulted you and, there was definitely steps to be taken that sometimes worked, sometimes didn't work. Anyway, it was something I look back now in 2019 and say, geez.
It's a different world.
Can we ever get back there? I mean, 66 Coupe de Villes, I had it was really an experience that I thought would only get better, but, with time.
Well, anyway. Yeah, it's funny how we look back on, things from when we were younger. We look back on things we wish didn't change, some things we wish were happy changed. Yeah.
Well, there was a lot of things going on in the 60s, with the war and
turbulent time.
Things and riots and whatnot. So it kind of was an interesting decade, to say the least. Clothes were big. I had clothes. I had a pair of shoes, like every color of the rainbow, that matched every pair of pants and every shirt and every leather jacket and suede jacket I had, but I missed those things.
Well, it's funny. That's not that different from the way young guys are now. The guys have a million pair of shoes. Yeah. Like sneaker culture is an actual thing.
Sneakers were very low.
It's different
on the
types
list.
of shoes, obviously. But
you had a couple of pair of sneakers when you wanted to go play sports, but they were really fancy shoes.
Yeah. So where you grew up in Newark, in that area, was it like racially? Was it set up where it's Italians in this neighborhood,
Yep.
Irish in this neighborhood, and
It was
Like, what was the
basically an
makeup?
Italian neighborhood.
Okay.
We had at that point, based on just the way the population evolved and changed, the Irish were in that area 1st. Italians came later. I don't know in terms of. I could tell you, my grandfather arrived here, and who I'm named after, Raffaello. He came here by himself. I think it was 1904. And he, raised a family. He came to Newark, and that was the beginning, I guess. That time period is when the Italians really started to immigrate to New Jersey and to America, through Ellis Island and all that. So he raised a family. He had, my father and had like 7 brothers. He had 3 sisters. All his brothers were like tough guys, but. Anyway, that's that. But we had, so I had good Irish friends. Joe Pat Riley, still a good friend to this day.
Joe Pat.
Joe Pat, Sister Mary, sweetheart. But anyway, it was a lot of Italians and Irish, and then I guess in the mid '60s, a lot of the Puerto Ricans started to move into that Newark area, and the blacks always had their neighborhoods. And when you went to school, you kind of, even though you stayed with your group, you mingled with them and you had friends with them, and it was an interesting, experience because it changed a lot since then. It's the way the world evolves, I guess. So I had some friends in high school. Charlie Craddock. I remember. I'll tell you a quick story. I used to have a little trouble in school. I'd stay in a lot. This was when after I left Essex Catholic, where I got asked to leave by the brothers there, and we'll go back to that if we got time.
Brothers, you talk about the priests.
The priests, the ones who.
For any young people listening.
No,
to
I
Catholic
didn't
school.
mean. Yeah, it was
no,
brothers,
I know.
They're like monks, or what do you want to call them?
Yeah, we got to make sure that people listening know what the hell we're even talking about.
They called them brothers. They weren't priests. I guess there was they could do certain things, but beat you up. But anyway, so after I left Essex Catholic, I was in Bloomfield Tech, and so I must have been a junior. And we had my good friend Teddy Dialco, Chucky, my cousin Ralph. There was a lot of us that were in that school together. And what happened one day was I had to stay in after school, and Charlie Craddock was a black teenager or black kid that had kind of like he was a tough kid, and he had his little group of guys, and we always respected each other. So now one day after school, there was a white kid, who was waiting for me outside, was going to give me a beating, and he had a group of guys with him.
Italian kid?
I don't think he was Italian. I think it was kind of...
like a mix?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was waiting for me, and there was a group of guys there, and Charlie was coming out of school, and he put down his book and said, "Ain't nobody gonna mess with Ralph. You want to fight with Ralph?" He says, "You can't." And he had his guys with him. We can make this a group thing, or we can make it an individual thing. He says, "You got that? Nobody's getting involved." And he came to my without even thinking. I always remembered that. Now that's got to be. I must have been 17. So you're talking 66. And those things, you run into people, and I always did. You ran into people that you think you're not supposed to like because of a certain race or a certain group, and you always thought Italians were and that's not true either, because there's a lot of Italian guys that you realize, they're not your friends. An acquaintance maybe, but not your friend. And that's a lesson you got to learn in life.
I agree 100%.
That I learned in the 60s, and thinking like all Italian kids think, "Oh, he's Italian." Oh, but. And then you see that some of them are not honorable or trustworthy or take advantage of you. It always goes back in my mind to energy. When you have a good friend, a gumbari, however you want to call it. When they're down, you're down, and when they're down, you could tell, and you give them your energy. I mean, literally, you give them your feelings and good thoughts so they get through it.
It's like you pour yourself into them.
Yeah,
You know?
let them know. And so when you're down, you need that energy too. An acquaintance will take your energy, but he'll never return it when you need it. And that's the sign. That's the first. And now, you could ignore it because you might like the person and say,
Yeah.
he wouldn't do that.
Nah, he's a
but
fun
you're only
guy.
fooling yourself.
Yeah, you don't want to see it because it can mess up the good times you're having at the moment.
Yeah, so the thing is, that's an important lesson that you learn. And then when you see an acquaintance, you talk to them like, if you're sitting at the bar, you're sitting there with one of your gumbadis, it's a whole different experience. When an acquaintance comes in, you're not nasty to them. They tell you a problem or blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And when they leave, the problem leaves with them. With the friend, the problem
Your problem is my
remains
problem.
for you to see how you can help them out. That's basically what I'm talking about. So you can't go around giving out your energy to everybody and not get it back. So that was basically Newark in the 60s. There was a lot of good things. We used to have a lot of fun, nightclubs and stuff that we used to go to. The Venetian, the V, they used to call it. Everybody in there was packed, but it was something. Anyway, so so I don't know where you want to go, at what point you want to go next. But I could tell you, basically.
Before we go there, I was gonna say like that time period. I know a lot of people. The only thing they have in their mind to visualize it is movies.
Yeah.
Like you think of like the movie A Bronx Tale.
They always said you missed your shot, Ralph. You should have been in one of those movies. But that some of that.
But do you think like that those kind of depictions are accurate?
Yeah, most of them are based on some level of reality. You got a Joe Pesci and a Frankie Vincent. They grew up right there in Belleville, which is right next to the Italian. There was a section in Belleville which is right next to Newark called Silver Lake, and that's where all of the Italian, like a Little Italy, if you will, and that's where all those. That's where Joe Pesci came from. That's where Frankie Valli came from. Well, Frankie Valli actually came from Newark, but they were friends, Frankie Valli and Joe and Frankie Vincent. And they basically based their roles in the movies on guys
that were really there.
Like Gebert, who was a notorious gangster in the Belleville area. That was one of supposedly was in the Gotti family. But anyway, he was mad dog, just a mad dog. He was 5'6", maybe 130 pounds, and he shoot you in a second. And a lot of things, I'll tell you, for instance, like Joe Pesci, what movie where I think it was a Casino? It was Casino, where they're at the bar and De Niro's there and he got the pen.
With the pen, yeah.
That was a Gebert thing that he took.
Really?
Oh yeah. He patterned himself. All them crazy scenes, he was relying or pulling out of the Gebert experiences that he had.
Gebert?
His name was Robert Basilio.
That was like a nickname.
Well, I'll tell you why it was his name. He used to be a fastball, softball pitcher. Nobody could hit him. Nobody could hit him. He threw the ball in the hand. You couldn't hit it. His name was Robert. So in baseball, when you strike somebody out, they call it a K.
Okay.
And he was striking so many people out that they started calling him, instead of Robert, K-Bert.
Oh.
And it became Gebert.
Gotcha.
It's crazy how these names. But, he was just a mad dog.
Just,
but anyway,
that's a wild boy.
Yeah, but those are stories, like you said, the Bronx Tale. What was the other movie with not Casino?
Goodfellas.
Goodfellas. A lot of that. It was the way it was, and that's how you grew. That's how you grow up. There was laws, rules, or unwritten rules that you had to follow. But
as a young man, in your mid to late teens, early 20s, like what did you guys do? I know you said you went to nightclubs. Like I know, like you see in the movies, they had like the young guys have their own little social club and stuff like that.
Well, one of the things that I remember really well is they had, and this was, I don't know if it was the same thing in New York as New York. I mean, that was, it was the same culture. You would rent these like, I don't want to call them storefronts, but buildings. Sometimes they were storefronts, and you would make them social clubs. And everybody had social clubs, and they all had different names. but they would, it'd be like a little lounge. Some of them had bars. I remember one of the social clubs I was involved in was right near St. Benedict's Field in Newark, and it had a lot of older Italian gentlemen there. Had a pool table. We used to shoot craps. We had the poker tables. We played cards, mariachi, bridge, poker, blackjack, and everybody. And then there was a jukebox, and there was a couple other things. Maybe you could bring in some lady friends and have a little entertainment because we had a nice bar, and everybody would pay. You would pay for your drinks, but you wouldn't pay like you would in a, it was
Gotcha.
basically to cover the cost of everything.
Keep the place running.
Yeah, so that was one of them. But that was when I was older. I was in my 20s, but I was in those things with just guys my age when I was 17 and 18. We used to play cards a lot. And we had pool tables in them, and it was more wild with the girls, let's say, or women, because we were 17, 18, 19, and there's stuff going on there that shouldn't.
Listen, the teenage boys are like some of the worst people in the entire world.
They would make for an X-rated movie, I guess.
Yeah.
But anyway, we used to play cards. We used to play pinochle. We used to play hearts. We used to play mariachi, it's an Italian game, brisque. I can remember like it was yesterday, these games. Then we would have these blackjack games. And the blackjack games, were at night, usually on the weekends. And they were notorious. Every little club had their blackjack games. You had guys that would travel. I mean, it was playing for money, big money. So I remember this one story I got to tell you. We're playing blackjack in another club. It's on Bloomfield Avenue, which was the main drag. We used to call it the Avenue. And it's a pretty big game. And so there was a character that grew up that just a crazy character. His name was Mickadoo.
Oh, okay.
They used to call him the Mick.
It's a famous name in that time.
Oh,
in that
he was like a living legend. In his own mind, but he was still a living legend.
Yeah.
So the Mick is playing, and he used to cheat the cards be on the floor and everything. So there was a guy named, was another mad dog. I'll tell you stories about, but you wouldn't run out of time. But anyway, he was a degenerate gambler, and he was a notorious thief and highwayman, if you will. So he comes into the game. Now the way I used to play the game in the streets, if guy has the bank, so he's the house, so to speak. So if he sets up $500 as his bank, then he goes around. How much do you want? 20. How much do you want? 30. How much do you want? Blah, 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 blah. And then if you win, lose, he pays you. Now you could stop the bank, which means if you want to take the whole 500, you stop the bank, and if you win, then you get the bank. So comes into this game, and he sees Mickadoo there, and he kind of respects Mickadoo, I guess, and I knew him pretty well, but he was a notorious character. He stops the bank, whatever it was, and so now the bank is doubled because he stopped it. So if there was, for instance, I don't remember the exact numbers, whatever high. If it was 500 and then now it's 1,000, he stops it again for 1,000, loses. Now it's 2,000, stops it again and loses. So he tries to do it on credit. Now the guy who's got the bank is nervous. He's shaking because he's got a couple of $1,000 there, and he knows he's got a maniac here. So he says, you can't, he starts doing it like that because he was trying to tell him you don't have the money, you can't stop the bank.
Hey, it's 4,000 here. There's four
so
big
that's
ones.
what he said. So he says, all right, he starts throwing curses out and says, all right, I'll be right back. He comes back. So I said to Mick, this might be a good time to leave. So he says, what? I said, this might be a good time to leave. So I said, he said, nah, don't worry about it. I won't do nothing. So I go excuse myself. I went to the barn, and there was a bathroom back there because I had a bad feeling. Sure enough, he walks back with 2 guns and holds up the game. So he goes, where did Ralph? Was it Ralph? He said, oh, he left. So he's taking everybody's money. And he looks at Mick. He says, Mick, you can keep your money. He says, don't worry about it. He says, well, I lost a few dollars. He says, don't push it. He says, why not? So anyway, he threw him a few more dollars and he leaves. There was a big thing after that. Who was going to kill him? The wise guys were involved and all that.
Oh my God.
I was hiding in the friggin' bathroom. But that was one story of many. I mean, there used to be a guy on the corner of Bloomfield Avenue and Lake Street, which was right next to the park, Branchbrook Park, which was right near where we used to hang out.
It's like the Central Park in Newark.
Yeah. And there was this guy's name was Eddie Hot Dog. He used to want them hot dogs. He used to sell hot dogs. He had the best he must have made. He had that cart there all night, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, from like early.
Where you
on.
sell like the soubrettes and stuff.
They put the chili and the mustard and the relish and they used to sell the yoo-hoos. Everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so when I go there, he would always say, "General Gambler, where's the game tonight, Ralph? Where's the game?" There's one over here on Empire Parkway, that's our club, but there's one down here on Bloomfield Avenue. And he would go there. He would have like literally 2,000-3,000 from what he made that day. That's a lot of money back
Yeah,
in '60s.
that's a big
And
chunk.
he lose it all. He would lose it. I said, and they would just say, "Give me enough to buy some hot dogs back." I said, "Yeah, okay." Not to me, but he would just. Anyway, those were the games, and that was the way it was. That was like, this is way before Atlantic City, and.
What do you mean before Atlantic City?
Well, when Atlantic City opened, I guess in the '80s, this was our gambling. We used to play blackjack, and we used to, shoot craps, and it was like a way of life. So, one of the reasons why some of the guys there was a younger crew. Let me step back. There was a younger crew of guys that maybe 3, 4 younger than us. Just the way there was older crews that we looked up to, and we learned things from the older crew, and we passed it on to the younger crew. So some of the younger crew, they all, gravitated to us, and looked up to us, and we taught them, we used to teach them how to shoot craps, how to play mariachi, how to play poker. The H-man who's now in, he was a natural. I'm talking when they were 13, 14 years old. So now they get older. We're 25. Who's married? Who's this? Who's that? But you still hung out a little bit. These guys were just becoming 20, 21. Atlantic City opens up. They all shoot down there. They got the street smarts. They got all the knowledge of how to play games on the street that you play in the casino. I mean, the only thing you didn't play on the street was roulette. You played everything else. And they shot right up the ladder. It was like he could get to a crap table and just clean it out because he was that good. But anyway, that's how. So
yeah, they advanced it within that organization.
So when Atlantic City opened up, it was natural for us to go down there too because we, grew up on that stuff. But it was, as I look back, there's so many experiences that, some good, some bad with gambling and all the other stuff that goes with it,
So let me move in a different direction here.
Yeah.
So you come from a big family, obviously.
Yes.
3 boys, 3 girls. Plus you had, your mother, father, plus your mom's 2 sisters lived with you. Like.
Yeah, it's funny. My mother had mostly sisters, 7 sisters, 8 sisters, and my father had mostly brothers. My father was a big guy. He was 6'3". My mother was 5'0". Here she came from a small family of. When I say small, we're not tall.
Yeah.
And my father all his brothers were, he was the biggest one, but they were all 6 foot and better. And, I can remember when I got in trouble a couple of times. He always wanted me to be like 6 foot tall, and 6'2", and he used to have me hang on the chin-up bar, especially when I did something wrong, which infrequently that happened. But anyway, I used to tell him, "Dad, you gave me nothing to work with here. Look at that, you know what I mean? No DNA." My mother was not even 5 foot. But anyway, so yeah, we had a big family, and that's another thing that really has changed, and
Yeah, you don't see that anymore.
Well, our families were all his brothers, his sisters, my mother's families, sisters, basically, grew up, started their own family, but we all were in the same area. So we spent all the holidays together. It would be nothing to have 25, 30 people. We always had Christmas Eve at our house.
Yeah.
And they put on a spread. You've seen it now with my brother.
We walk in, there's like 50, 60 people sometimes.
Yeah, and there's food enough for 100. And that's the way it was for all the holidays. And all your cousins, I had cousins. I still see some of them, but, who moves? I'm in Florida now. They're up in New Jersey.
Everybody's spread out over the years.
Who's in Texas now? Who's in, Milwaukee? I got a cousin in Milwaukee, but that was unheard of, So yeah, it was the brothers, my brothers and sisters. I always seem to have to take care of one of them or the other. Especially.
Well, you're the oldest boy.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I had to make sure that when my brother Eddie, who's got a wonderful career as a lawyer, you could tell he was going to be a lawyer because he had a mouth on him. The toughest guys would shake when he came in because they couldn't. He wasn't a fighter, but they knew if they said something, he would just keep hitting
tear him apart.
Oh yeah, he would remember to this day. To this day, he's 66. He just turned 66. He will tell you if you bring up a name, what that guy did that made him
Oh yeah, that prick. He used to comb his hair in the meat market. Yeah, I know him.
No, he won't forget things. So, anyways, but sometimes he got into trouble, and I had to step in and took a few whacks for him and here and there, and. It's part of being a brother, I guess. And my sisters, kind of had to keep an eye on them to make sure that nobody messed with them.
Do you feel like being the oldest boy, like that created? I know because your father probably put more responsibility on you being in that position. Do you think that created like a tension? Like I know most boys when they get to a certain age, they tend to butt heads with their dad, like.
Yeah, I butted heads with him. Mostly he butted my head, but it was there was tension, but he was a different kind of guy. Here's a guy that grew up was born in 1922. Was a big guy, tough guy, and he
World War II vet.
Well, I tell you, he had a fight with the football coach. I think he knocked him out or something. Left school, and he went to. Now he's 17 years old, and he went into what they call the C camps, and there was by the government the federal government was giving these kids jobs to help build the state parks all around the country. So he worked like a dog, and then the war came, and he went right to the war. Comes back from the war. He was in the South Pacific fighting the Japanese, which was a tough enemy. And he gets married and starts to have a family. So they didn't have any time to find themselves, what I mean? What people later on did. And it's just the way,
it's the way the world was
population
back then.
evolves and the world evolves. And so he was a no-nonsense guy. He did not take crap from anybody. He knocked you out in a second. But you had to say the first word or whatever. But
he wasn't a bully, but he didn't put up with bullshit.
Yeah, and so it was tough, trying to imitate your father.
Big shoes to fill.
Well, he
literally
and 12 of those,
and metaphorically.
Yeah, you're talking about big shoes. I'll tell you a quick shoe story.
Go ahead.
So he used to come home from work, and when he came home from work, he was very successful in the police department and had a brilliant career there, and he owned a couple of gas stations too, because he always felt like our family, needed more money. And so did
6
what he had
kids,
to
yeah.
do. He did what he had to do, yeah, to make sure everybody was, maintained properly. So anyway, he comes home and it was, everything stopped when he walked in the house. You didn't mess around. So he would have dinner, and dinner had to be on the table, and everything had to be right. And then he would go sit in what they call the parlor or the TV room, and he would get the recliner and he'd put it back and he'd put the TV on, and he'd take those shoes off that looked like boats, and he would put them on the side of the recliner, and then he would, those off. Here's the picture I'm trying to paint. The only light on is the TV light, so it's kind of like, and he was watching something, or I was watching something, but he was just dozing off. So I was kind of kneeling, and like I used to sit sometimes in front of the TV, and he was off to the right. And my two brothers are running around. My mother's washing the dishes or doing whatever she's doing, cleaning up from dinner. And, she's telling them to stop because they were getting a little crazy. So she says, I'm going to call your father. So I was thinking kids are going to get it. So she says it again. So I says, I'm just going to stay. I'm not doing nothing. So all of a sudden she says, Bruno. He jumps. He now, from being in the South Pacific, he was one of them guys. When he woke up, he was thought he was being attacked.
Full attention.
I'm at full attention. Looks at me. So I said to myself, he's gonna see I'm not doing anything. I'm sitting here doing nothing. Picks up the shoe. Says, you son of a bitch, throws it. And as the shoe was coming tumbling towards me, I says, I should have ran. Hits me. Knocked me down like one of them dolls on the boardwalk there.
Yeah.
And the whole house goes quiet. Woo. Ralph got knocked out. It's okay. It's over with. And then he went back.
Like out?
Nah, but that I took a few shots from him. He could hit. I'm sure he pulled them, but
Yeah.
But anyway, that was a story about the family and how that was a typical. Now I must have been like, I don't know, 10, 11 years old at that time. So once we got a little bit older, I knew to stay out of the house at that time. So anyway, where would you like to discuss?
Let me ask you this. Later on, obviously, you became a father, and then you became a stepfather.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very different situation that I'm sure you were, obviously, than you were raised with. So it's a delicate situation too. So now I'm almost in the exact same shoes you were. Mm. So I want to ask, like, what are some things, like maybe some lessons or some things your dad did that you took away from him that you thought were valuable? Like, what are some values you think that?
Well, the one thing you got to start with it is the value system, and he always commanded by his presence and by his actions respect, and you always wanted to be respected, even though growing up and being a teenager, sometimes you didn't behave in a way that would command respect. But when you're exposed to the value system and the system of fair, and the understanding of fair play and right and wrong, you take that. It's a lesson you learn, and you realize at some point that the role models you thought on the street, were characters that you meet in life.
Maybe not the people you want to model the rest of your life after.
And so at some point you gotta be you gotta have a work ethic. You gotta find something that you'd like to do, and that you get up for work every day and you go to work. Because I never could recall him not going to work every day. I mean, it was like, and then after doing whatever he did all day long with the police department, he would stop at the different businesses, the gas stations, to make sure everything was right there. And eventually, I started working at some of the gas stations when I became 17, and they weren't in the best part of the city, and so there was some,
some rough neighborhoods,
concerns you had about, and the things you had to look out for, and how to take care of yourself. And those are some of the things I learned from him, and hopefully I didn't have to use any of my knowledge of how to take care of yourself frequently like he did. But so when you get married the first time, you was like I think I was 25, and you have a child. It's a whole new experience. You got a baby now at the house, and you more or less start to understand, what your parents were
Why they
about.
did the things they did.
Yeah. And you try to, you do things sometimes without saying, "Oh, my father." You just do them because that's what you know.
Exactly.
And now, see, the other thing that I should mention is the family situation was a lot different then.
Yeah.
The family situation when I grew up, the husband, was the breadwinner.
Mm-hmm.
So he went out, and like I said, he had to make another job or open a business or do whatever he had to do. He brought the money, the bread. He put the bread on the table.
Mm-hmm.
The woman, the mother, stayed home.
Yeah.
And took her job, take care of the kids.
That's the old
take care of my
traditional
house,
model.
Keep it clean, keep the food coming, and keep everybody happy. And that's the way it was.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
it's a different world today now.
Well, my life bridged that and the change to where women wanted to go to work,
Mm-hmm.
and they wanted to be able to do both things, or some of them just wanted to work. But anyway, so that was an experience because, my first wife worked.
Mm-hmm.
And she was a boss, and then so some of the things that I had to deal with at that point, I wasn't prepared to deal with.
Gotcha.
Especially when the baby came along. But before, when the baby came along, we both worked. We had dinner, but then you see that one of the things that I had to deal with was her thinking that she told people what to do during the day. Maybe she could tell me what to do at night. Not, without realizing that that's what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a change that now you got to deal with. How do I handle this?
Well,
and then your immediate action is to push back on it, and because my father wouldn't take that.
Yeah.
So you go through that whole, but then at some point, you go through the ups and downs of that evolution, and either you deal with it one way or deal with it another way. But at some point, you deal with it, and sometimes you go separate ways, which happened, and you get on with life.
You touched on something that's interesting. It's a lot of the ways we model what the family should be, what a relationship should be, is based off our parents and what we grew up with. And it's funny because for a lot of people, definitely not everybody, but it seems like a lot of our ways are based off a world that has changed so much. You know what I mean? So it's like a system that worked in an old model, but the model's changed and we're still using the same system. So I feel like that is a situation where a lot of people find tension and conflict.
Well, all those things shape a person's psyche, shape a person's perspective on what life is about, how they're supposed to act, what they are, who they are, how do you do this with it. Now, things are so complicated with women, men, and women relationships. I wouldn't know if I was a young guy having to deal with this.
Yeah.
Because in my day, you were king. Guy
Yeah.
was king. The guy could tell them, the women, whether or not they wanted to play that role, that's the role they played.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's
It's
like
different
I said,
now. It just doesn't fly anymore.
When I first got married, women were wanted to work and have children, and they wanted it all.
Mm-hmm.
And that changed and evolved to the next level, which meant, that there was women were becoming more, felt like they could take over a man's role more and more. So,
Well, I think that's
how do you deal with that?
That's like the combination of two things that we were talking about before, where it's you have now women are working the way the world works. Sometimes you have a relationship where both people have to work because for money, or it's like you said, also it used to be like that back in the day. The man was the king, and now that doesn't fly anymore.
No.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why you see a lot of guys who are a lot of men, young men nowadays, kind of lost, looking for something, trying to figure out their place, because you have these old roles that just they don't fit into the world we live in nowadays. So there's a lot of people trying to find their footing and try to find the best way.
Like I said,
That's what this is about. You
I
know?
couldn't deal with it today if I was young. I wouldn't know what to do because I knew what to do when I was growing up. And by the same token now, with the relationships with men and women and marriages and all that, I gotta again go back to the time my family and families in my day. You didn't have kids in daycare centers all day long.
That was never a thing.
The mother was there to take care of that kid all day. You know, now look what it's evolved into. Because, you know, when I married your mother, and we became a blended family, or whatever they call them today.
A modern family.
You kids were in daycare because everybody had to work.
Yep.
And I think it's good and bad. Kids might be learning how to socialize a little bit more with other kids, but also there's a downside to it because they don't have that. You know what? Nobody can love you like your mother.
Yeah,
I don't
the
care what
family
you say.
connection isn't there like it used to be.
And some of those daycare teachers can get a little abusive.
No,
because
you hear about it in the
dealing
news
with
all the
everybody
time.
else's kid, and maybe they want to be home with their kid, and maybe this and that. I'm not saying that they're not perfect; they're not robots, and I think that can have an impact on a kid too, growing up, because they may get things done to them. Either somebody's taking advantage of them, another child, and nobody's doing anything about it to intercept it, or the teacher is, or the daycare keeper.
Well, I mean, that kind of thing can happen anywhere.
I'm just saying, though, all those things, you know, have an impact on a child's development. And I was always thinking of that when you guys were growing up and having to deal with that. So I always tried to find out whether or not anything was happening. You might not remember, but I used to ask questions and say things like to you that, just because a person has a role of authority, a teacher, a nun, a priest, and they wear an outfit, a policeman, a fireman, that doesn't mean they're perfect people. They can do bad
uniform.
things. So if they do something, don't let that. You just say, hey, push back on them and say, hey, you can't do that. If they're touching you in a certain way or talking to you in a certain way, because you got to protect people.
Yeah.
And I always felt a need to have discussions just so your child can see that somebody is not acting like they should be or behaving the way the uniform says they should behave. So those are all things I think that you learn as you grow up and you pass on, especially like you said, when you have a family of children that are not brother and sister by birth. You got to deal with that and bring them together and teach them all as best you can. Now, there's no, you don't know when you did the right thing or you didn't do the right thing.
You don't realize till decades later.
Right. And then, I look around and I say, hey, it looks like I turned out pretty well.
What are some things you think that I know now, like in the short time I've been a dad, there's a lot of things that I realized just about myself. I look back on my childhood at things you did that I didn't understand at the time, and now I say, I get it.
That's good when that light goes off. Yeah.
It goes off a lot. It goes off a lot.
I can still remember coming home one day and, you must have been like 7 or 8 years old. I don't know.
Is it the house on Brokaw?
Yeah. No. This was the house on Delaney. Yeah. It was Mischief's night.
Oh,
And
oh,
you were. Oh
I
my
remember.
God.
I was
You
a
were
little older
protecting
than
the
that.
house.
Yeah.
You were up in the tree.
I
Scared the shit out of me because you thought the kids were gonna come by.
Yeah, I took
with
it upon myself. Like,
yeah.
ain't nobody toilet paper in our house tonight. So I sat in the tree.
I said that made me proud though. You know what I mean? I said, oh, look at it. That's the things that it's funny how you remember things like that. But
Well, it's also funny too, like the relationship for me and you, because you're my stepfather, but you were there in my life from the time I was, before I started first grade.
Yeah.
So you've been there for a long time, and I don't look at you as like, oh, that's my mom's husband. Like I look at you as a father.
Yeah.
So when now that I'm in the exact situation you were in, I try to think of like, okay. I have Tyler. I don't want him to look at me like that's just the guy that married my mom.
Yeah.
Like I'm not trying to replace his biological
I know it's
father.
a difficult thing.
It's
and
a delicate line to walk.
You don't want to say anything negative about his father.
No, I would never do
even
that.
if there is something.
Yeah,
I mean,
whatever.
you want to protect him.
If there was any drama that would stay between us, it would never be something for him to worry about.
But that's a difficult proposition because you don't want to. You don't want to step over your bounds there. Boundaries. It's funny because when we start talking about this, and this is going to sound weird, but I'm thinking that there's a Geico commercial on now, where not the Progressive Insurance.
It's one of those insurance companies.
Yeah, where the guy is he's got the white suit on. He's in more of the commercials, and he's sitting there. There's two kids sitting on a sofa. Playing, the young kids must be 10, 12 years old, and they're playing with their games, and he's sitting there with the mother, and obviously the mother must be going through a divorce because he's trying to say to them, oh, aren't you happy that your mother is making sure that you're going to have this and that, and you're going to be insured, and the kid said, well, we don't want to have another father, so he said, oh, no, and he's trying to explain to the kid that there's and as he's explaining to the kid gets up and says, I'm going to go have make some more chicken fingers or something. And he says, oh, you're going to ruin your dinner. He said, you're not my father. He said, I went too far. But this is a stupid commercial. But
yeah, that's the thing. You don't want to overstep your boundaries. You're trying to find the boundaries.
Yeah. And you don't know when to, take a bigger step than you've been taking and when to step back. So it's, there's no secret formula. It's just, something you got to do with. You got to have the kid's best interest at heart.
Yeah, you got to really love the kid.
And you got to love the kid.
You got to allow yourself to love the kid because most kids are pretty lovable.
Yeah.
When you're around them, they can piss you off, but then at the drop of a dime, they could, all of a sudden you fall in love with them.
Yeah, but you also want to keep them on the straight and narrow.
Yes.
You want to give them good values. You want to give them good ethics to work with and know that you play and that, I'm not a pushover either.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're not going to get away with shit. But that's the line you got to, the balance that you got to try to maintain. And it's not easy. It's not easy. When you look back years later, you say, yeah, I did a good job. But as you're going through it, you really...
There's no way to know how it's going to turn out.
And sometimes you're saying, gee, I'm not doing the right thing. I feel bad. And then you can butt heads with your spouse.
Yeah.
Because, they feel a little bit more like, well, that's my child. And, you don't want to, start that battle. Because,
well, it's funny because sometimes, like... You could have, your stepchild, and you might have to yell at, discipline them, or reprimand them for something. Yeah. And then, their biological parent, well, no, like you're being too hard on them. But then, an hour later, they're screaming at them for leaving Cheetos somewhere, and then they're like, I'm sorry, I was out of line.
I remember one story. It always, I don't know, I just remember it so vividly. Talking about that. Now, down in, where do you used to live? I can't think of the name of the city.
Oh, Lindenwold?
Lindenwold. Down in the apartment there. And she's running around. She couldn't be more than 1.5 years old. And she's doing something, because I'm watching her to make sure she doesn't get hurt, because she's been a while. And she goes to stick her finger in the outlet. Like a socket. And I went berserk. I said, what are you, you can't do that. I yelled at her, she started crying. because, I was startled by it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you know? So, your mom starts getting on me. I said, she's going to put her finger in the sock
Trying
for
to
crying
save
out
her.
loud. I said, I know I got excited. I said, but I'm,
Mm-hmm.
because she was a big baby, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, that I remember that, and I said, geez, I got to be careful when something like that happens. All I was concerned about, though, was like preventing her from getting like electrocuted or electric shot of some type, and I didn't think anything else.
But it's those.
And I was saying, you don't do that, you don't put your finger. So, anyway, that's just an example.
But that's that old saying, like the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah.
So sometimes you could have the best intentions, and then along the way, you do something you didn't intend to, and it's
because
tricky.
you're reacting
Exactly.
at the moment that it could have been a situation that you didn't want. It's not an easy. It's and I guess as more and more of it is happening, because now it's everybody has these blended families. Her kids, my kids, our kids.
Well, it's fun. I think you start to see now, like there was in like the 90s and that time, there was the big wave of everybody was getting divorced and nobody could stay together. And now, like in my generation, like which I'm technically, according to the definition, I'm a millennial, even though people like to refer to the kids now as millennials, but that's like a totally new generation. But people around my age who grew up around like the 80s and the very early 90s, you're starting to see they wait to get married, they wait to have a kid. It's like they give themselves a chance to get established or to have a career. And you're starting to see there's less people getting married, but there's also less people getting divorced. Yeah. I think it's people kind of waiting until they take it a little more seriously.
Well, there's also the whole, time frame that we had recently where kids were staying home longer because of the college and the cost of
stuff out there.
And it all helps, develop a person and whatever they're going to become. All those experiences make up, what they will be, I think, or how they will think. Anyway, it takes a lot of different experiences and life to make a person complete. And you're still like, look, I'm 70 years old and I'm still trying to figure out what I'm
still trying to put the pieces together.
Yeah. What am I supposed to do now? I'm 70. How many more years I got left? I don't know. Should I go to the gym? Should I go get a job?
I think that's something too that a lot of people don't realize is, a lot of people have that it's called imposter syndrome. You're feeling like how long till they find out I don't know what I'm doing? Everybody feels like they don't know what they're doing. Well, the secret is that everybody feels the same way. Nobody knows what the hell they're doing. We're all just winging it.
It's basically some people wing it well and some people not so well.
Yeah.
Some people hit the lottery and some people don't.
Well, listen. In the interest of your time here, I want to put a pin in it here.
Okay.
So. I think people are gonna like hearing you on here.
Well,
have a unique
I got
voice.
some more stuff to share. So maybe in the future we'll do a grammar school. I got some stories to tell you about
We
the
could do that.
nuns and oh my God, I should write a book.
Listen, we could document it right here to begin with.
All right, my pleasure. I had a good time, and I hope this is helpful.
Hey, as always, I'm really thankful that you decided to share your wisdom with us.
And tell all your friends I was asking.
You got it. All right. So for anybody out there listening, you know where to find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, YouTube, SoundCloud, all the good podcast platforms. Wherever you get your podcasts, you can find us. If you have any questions, you want to suggest any topics, anything you want to talk to us about, you can reach out to us at APodAmongstMen@gmail.com. Also on Instagram at APodAmongstMen. You DM us. That's probably the best way. So, thanks for listening. We'll see you guys next week. Peace.